What's up, guys? Today we are back after a little bit of a break, but we are here to talk about some new developments after UFC 308 this past Saturday. It was a fun card, definitely carried by the last two fights, but what we got to talk about is a update to a video I was going to make, which was about the pound-for-pound list, which you can see here. This got updated barely, because even though Ilia Topuria had the first only knockout of Max Holloway's career, didn't move a single spot, Max Holloway moves down one, and somehow Israel Adesanya comes up. Because I think Robert Whittaker fell out, but this is the list. So we are going to fix it. I'm going to do my top 20, and we're going to fix this list, and there's going to be one very noticeable missing, and then some other ones are going to slide up and down, a couple other ones a bit lower down the rankings that you might be surprised not to see, but let's just get right into it. With mine here, we are going to start with the top three, which I think is pretty consensus at this point. We got Islam at number 1, Ilia number 2, and Alex Pereira at number 3. So Islam number 1, I don't think anybody's really debating that anymore. He's the best fighter in the sport. He's the most well-rounded. He's the best grappler and striker, like combination-wise. They're guys that are better at each individual thing, but they don't mix it as well as he does. And even though his fights, the first fight with Volkanovski and the fight with Dustin, were a bit more challenging than I think a lot of us were expecting, I think that really just shows his mettle. Like he can withstand adversity and come out on the other side and get a finish, submission, or a knockout, which he did in the second Volkanovski fight. So I don't think anybody's debating this one. Islam is number 1. I don't know how you can't say Ilia is number 2. He's got probably the best back-to-back wins in the modern UFC era. Like Volkanovski and Holloway, knocking them both out it's so impressive, because those are the two best featherweights of all time. Because you do want to give Jose Aldo some respect, but Volkanovski and Holloway have been the cream of the crop of that division for 5 years maybe, and Ilia knocked them both out, and that was something that hadn't really ever happened to either one of them. I know Volkanovski got knocked out by Islam before there is the fight with Topuria, but I mean, nobody's ever knocked Max Holloway out, and nobody knocked Volkanovski out at featherweight, I don't believe. So, I mean, he's just so good. I mean, he's started as a grappler, and now he's just an incredible striker. He's got such great defense, such great offense. He sets himself up so well with landing those big shots. So many guys have the big shot, the big power, and they just can't set it up. But he is a master of setting his up. And then Pereira, again, not a lot of debate here. I mean, he's the most dangerous fighter, dangerous striker in the UFC, I would say. Just can knock anybody out at any time, and he defends his belt, and he's super active, and interested to see him versus Magomed Ankalaev, but Ankalaev really isn't who I think we all think he is. I think because his name is Magomed Ankalaev, and he looks like the way he does, we think he's going to shoot takedowns and everything, but he didn't really against Rakic. Like, Rakic was the one who initiated the grappling, and it was kind of even. So I don't think that's as big of a difference as you might think from hearing Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. You think, oh, this guy's just going to wrestle him to death, but he likes to strike, and his striking is interesting, but I don't know how you can bet against Alex Pereira at this point, and I surely wouldn't. So going on to the next batch, 4, 5, and 6. Tom Aspinall, Dricus Du Plessis, and Belal Muhammad. Tom Aspinall, again, I don't think there's much debate here. He's the best heavyweight in the UFC. That's kind of full stop. I think it's interesting to think about him versus John Jones. We'll probably never see it, but I am a John Jones hater. So we will not be talking about John Jones because he's not an active fighter. He hasn't fought in like 2.5 years, so he's not active. So Tom Aspinall, for me, is the best heavyweight in the UFC, and I would pick him to beat basically every heavyweight. I like current heavyweight, I would say, like UFC or not. I think the only real fight I would be concerned for him when is like, or think that he might lose, is against Francis Ngannou, but we'll never see that, so that's fine. Next is Dricus Du Plessis. Middleweight is kind of a weird division. I think there's one other middleweight on this list, but I don't really, it's just goofy, like he's the champion and he's obviously very weird. Like he's a weird fighting style, but he just wins and he's the biggest, he's the strongest, and he's got great skill set, and any fight that he's in, it's going to be ugly, and he's probably going to win it. So there's one guy on this list that fought last weekend that we will talk about later in this ranking. But as for middleweight, don't really know what to think of it. Number 6 is Belal Muhammad, and I don't really know, like he is good. I'll say that. He's good. But he's getting up there in age, so I don't know how long he will be good. But I think he's always going to have a great game plan. He's going to have the right strategy to beat his opponents, and he can do it everywhere. That's his whole joke is the striking, the grappling, and the wrestling. And he mostly is correct in that. He's not going to knock anybody out. He's not going to submit anybody. So that's hard to say. Like with all these guys ahead of him, they can all finish a fight. They can all finish a fight. When they get an opportunity to, they can finish. But I don't think I can say the same for Belal Muhammad. If he gets an opening, if he gets somebody off there, like catches somebody on one foot and throws a big punch, I don't think he's going to finish them in that way, where all these guys, they can shut your lights off, they can tap you out in a moment's notice, but Belal can't do that. So that just invites problems, like if you have to go the full 25 minutes, then there's a lot of time for something wrong to happen. So that's why I don't have him any higher. And even still, sometimes I think 6 is too high for Belal, but I'll give him his respects. So next up, 7, 8, and 9, got Arman Tsarukyan, Max Holloway, and Pantoja. So these guys are all... This is kind of where we stopped seeing the kind of flawless fighters, I would say. Well, I guess we did after, because Dricus has flaws and Belal has flaws. But Max, obviously, we just saw him lose. Pantoja, we've seen him struggle, and Tsarukyan, we've seen him lose. Granted, they were tight decisions against difficult fighters, but Tsarukyan, I think he's very good. I think he and Islam are set up for a really fun fight again, just like all of Islam's fights have been in the past couple of years. He's just such a great grappler, and the only real weakness he has is like he's short and he has a bad temper. And I put down that I'm not sold on his finishing ability, and I think that's true. I still think that's true, I should say. He hasn't really finished any fights from what I can see recently. But, who knows? I mean, you're a finisher until you aren't, and you aren't a finisher until you are. And that's the same thing with Belal, They could come out in their next fights and find a rear naked choke in the first round and a half. So it could happen. But for Arman, I think it'll be a great fight between him and Islam. I'm never going to pick against Islam until he goes up in weight or something, but We will see. Max Holloway, I still think he's great. His fight against Ilia, he didn't get outclassed. He didn't get anything. Like, I think that says more about how good Ilia is than Max is washed or Max is bad. You know, he's still fairly young. He's been in the UFC forever, so he's been around for a long time, but he's still only in his early 30s. So I think now it's time for him to move on to 55. I think it's time for him to do a bunch of fun fights. Him versus Charles, him versus Dan Hooker, him versus Dustin Poirier again, him versus Michael Chandler. You know, like, lightweight is going to be so much fun for him to just do all these fun fights. And then when Islam leaves the division, you know, then we get a Max Holloway lightweight title run. But until then, he's just on to fun fights, you know, just have fun striking fights with other fan favorites and just make a bunch of money, get some cool clips for some Instagram edits, and get on your way. Pantoja, it's hard. Flyweight is hard because sometimes it feels like a totally different sport because aside from Kai Kara France, nobody can really knock anybody out cold. So it's super scrambly. It's super fast-paced. And Pantoja's game is perfectly suited to that. Doesn't have the greatest cardio all the time, but he always gets like a second wind in his fights, and his ground game is super fun, super interesting. Gotta check out Jack Slack's work and talking about Pantoja and his leg entries on the ground. Super interesting stuff, and I love when people do things that aren't as conventional, you know. So I think he finds a way to win every fight. That's the big thing with him. So it's not like I wouldn't pick against him like some of these other guys, some of these other champions. I would maybe pick against him, but I'll probably always be wrong because, like I said, he finds a way to win every time. He'll find a win from a loss, or he'll recover after a tough round and he'll win the next round and get a 10-8 the next, you know. He's super scrappy. He's good fun to watch, and I am excited to see him defend his title. Coming up, what was that, December? Yeah, in December. So the next batch, rounding out the top 10 and then getting started in the 15, we got Khamzat Chimaev at number 10. I'll just talk about him real quick before we get down to here, so the formatting looks all right. Yeah, I mean, I'm sold. I think because he only fights once a year now, which sucks, especially that's how he was kind of billed when he came into the UFC, was like he's going to fight 5 times every year or something. But now that all the visa stuff, and he can only really fight in Abu Dhabi, it seems like, and his immune system is that of a kid in the Great Depression when, you know, he keeps getting polio and all this stuff. When he fights, he's great. I mean, not to quote Joe Rogan, but nobody does that to Robert Whittaker. But, like, he's so good. Like, his wins against Kamaru Usman and Robert Whittaker are very impressive, you know. Like, I think, obviously, like, in the first round, there's nobody more dangerous than Khamzat Chimaev. He will take you down. That is not a question of if. It is a will. He will take you down. It's not if he takes you down. He will do it, and he will probably get on your back. And then it's up to you to survive. I mean, Kamaru Usman survived. Robert Whittaker did not. So if the only person who can survive Khamzat Chimaev in the first round is Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns, that's pretty good, I think, because Gilbert Burns, obviously great jiu-jitsu, and then Kamaru Usman is one of the best fighters of all time, and it's definitely in welterweight, you know. I know it was up a weight class, but it's still very impressive. His last 2 wins have been great, and they're totally sold on me. You know, he was fighting kind of whatever competition, you know, Gerald Mearshard and Kevin Holland, you know, good wins, I guess, but nothing like his last 2 wins where I am ready to see him versus Dricus. I don't want to see Sean Strickland fight Dricus again. I don't need to see that. I'm ready to see Khamzat Chimaev. We are back on the train. We're ready to go to Title Town. So Now that we're done with the top 10 here, we'll go on to 11 through 13. These are, I think Merab is the lowest rated champion here. And then we got Volkanovski and Leon Edwards. Merab, kind of just like tiny Belal Muhammad, I would say. He is not going to finish anybody. We'll just say that. He's not going to finish anybody. And he can get caught, like we've seen Belal Muhammad get caught. But you can't deny how good he is. And at that weight class, that's kind of what you need, is to be able to go for the full 25 and have a skill that you can rely on. You know, Sean O'Malley, he had that when he was the champion. He had his striking, and he'll always have his striking. But when you meet a wrestler, the wrestler will win unless you can stop them from doing what they're going to do, you know. So I do think Merab is good, but I might pick Umar to beat him. So next is Volkanovski. I still think he's great. I don't want to see him fight Ilia again, though. After seeing Ilia knock out Max Holloway, I do not want to see Volkanovski get knocked out by him again. I don't know what's next for him in that case. I think I'd rather see him fight a contender at featherweight and then work his way back to the shot. I need to see him against somebody and not get knocked out before I will pick him to do well in a fight where he got knocked out by that guy, you know. But I still think he's great. I don't think he'll ever be the finisher he was a couple years ago when he was finishing every fight. It seemed like he was finishing Yair Rodriguez, you know. Like, I think that part of Volkanovski is done, but I think he can be that safe, strong fighter that he was, where he's able to mix in the wrestling and he's staying outside and he's got great defense. But I don't know how much longer we have with him, so that's why I'm tentatively keeping him at number 12 out of respects for the guy, you know. And then we got Leon Edwards at 13, one of the fighters that I am not a fan of that a lot of other people are. I call him a poor man's Islam Makhachev because he is very well-rounded. He's able to take people down, and whether that's people being surprised that he's trying or not, but, I mean, he's done it in basically all of his fights recently, is taking down the wrestlers that are supposed to beat him, and the wrestler that did beat him in Belal. But I just think his mental game is not there. He doesn't have the aggression. His activity is super low, and he can just like get defeated. You know, I think we all kind of saw that in the Belal fight. Like, he just kind of felt defeated after the first couple of rounds and couldn't make a comeback. So that keeps him lower for me. I think his next fight is going to be very, very important for his career because he's going to fight somebody tough. You know, he's going to fight Jack Della Maddalena, or he's going to fight Sean Brady, or he's going to fight Ian Gary. You know, it's going to be big for him because he's going to be fighting another young guy who's probably going to be hungrier than he is to get back to the title. And it's up to him to prove to himself and to everybody else that, like, he can be a finisher. He can be that killer that we all kind of got tricked into thinking he was when he had kicked Kamaru Usman. So we will see going forward. 14, 15, 16, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Charles Oliveira, and Sean O'Malley. And I might as well talk about Umar too, because kind of spoiled that he's down there too. So for Shavkat, I think he's kind of like the opposite of Leon Edwards, because Leon's super technical, you know, outside fighter, all that stuff. But Shavkat, not super technical. He's got an iron chin, and he is aggressive. He's going to go forward, and he's going to strike with you until he shoots and takes you down, and then he's going to go for the finish. So he is, I mean, we all know the stat about like 18 wins, 18 finishes. So he's the opposite Leon Edwards. He's not going to decision. So something's got to give when he fights Belal Muhammad, the decision machine, versus the man allergic to a finish or allergic to a decision. So I do think he's good, though. I think he's got a very good chance of beating Belal. I think just the fact that he can find a finish and Belal can't is very important. And I think that just means he's in the fight the whole time. Even if Belal dominates the wrestling and the striking exchanges for the first 2 minutes or 2 rounds or whatever, Shavkat can find a finish at some point. So next is Charles Oliveira. Did not realize that he had 10 losses. Wow, I didn't realize that he had, 45 fights? God, that's crazy. But yeah, he's a fun fighter, talented. I still think he's good. I think he's going to beat Michael Chandler, and then he's kind of right back in the thick of things. And he's only lost to two of the top 10 guys. I have Islam at 1 and Arman in the top 10 as well. So it's not like his losses are bad. And that's the thing with a lot of these guys in this area. Their losses are to guys ahead of them in the rankings. So it's not like I feel bad putting them here. They're still good. The losses are high-quality losses. But Charles, we've seen him be able to get hurt. We've seen him be able to get submitted. We've seen him able to get knocked out. So there are ways to beat him, but I just think he's a super talented guy. And if he puts everything together for another title run like he did after Khabib retired, then I would love to see that. If he got his title run where he was fighting Chandler and Dustin and Gaethje, like that was like prime lightweight stuff right there. So hopefully we get to see it again. If Islam goes up to 70, then maybe we'll get to see it. But like my dream title fight after Islam leaves the division, if Islam leaves the division, will be Charles versus Max. I mean, God, that would be so much fun. But in terms of title fights that I don't want to see, I do not want to see Sean O'Malley get a rematch with Merab Dvalishvili, and I would rather see Umar get that fight, which they're the next two guys, 16 and 17. Sean O'Malley, I think he needs time off. I know he's been injured. That's the thing with a guy built like him at a weight class like that. They're probably always going to deal with injuries, which sucks. But, I mean, for somebody like O'Malley who loves his excuses, it's always going to make a built-in excuse for him. But I think he is good. I do think he's very talented. I do think he's very athletically gifted. It's just he's got to work. He's got to work like he's got to go the Jose Aldo school of defending takedowns, except for the stalling on the wall part. Then maybe not that part, but in open space, I mean. So I think he can definitely make a comeback, but he's got to have another fight before he goes back to the title, because even though I didn't agree with Umar fighting Corey Sandhagen at the time, I thought it was such a big rankings difference. He showed he belonged. So I would say beating Corey Sandhagen definitely earns you a title shot. And he's super well-rounded. He ended up kind of outstriking Corey and kind of the wrestling being equal, but I think that could be the case that happens with Merab. I think that wrestling kind of gets nullified, and then it's a striking fight, and I pick Umar in that. So I'm not super sold on his finishing ability. I know he gets a lot of rear naked chokes, but those kind of seem to come against opponents that get overwhelmed by his wrestling, and the guys at the top end of this division are not going to get too overwhelmed by it. Maybe O'Malley would after what happened against Merab, but like Sandhagen didn't get overwhelmed, Merab's not going to get overwhelmed. So I think he's not much of a finisher, which, again, for some of these guys like Leon and Merab, that keeps them lower, because if you can't get a finish, like I said with Belal, if you can't get a finish, then you have to go the full 25, and that's just inherently risky. So next will be the final three of the video, 18, 19, and 20. This is where we've got one guy who kind of sticks out here. It might be a bit early for Caio Borralho. I still don't really know how to say it. But he's number 20. I got Jack Della Maddalena at 19, and then I got Aljamain Sterling at 18. I feel like I'm the only guy who is giving Aljamain Sterling the respect he needs. I think he's such a great grappler, and I think 45 is where he belongs. I'm pretty bummed. I know nobody's ever said this about a Movsar-Evloev fight, but I'm pretty bummed he didn't get to fight Movsar at 307. I think that really would have put him in title contention, because now we're talking like Diego Lopez as the next shot, or because I don't think anybody really wants to see Volk do it again, but he's probably gonna. Which, I mean, he deserves. He saved the UFC a lot. Like he was one of their big stars for a while, so I get that they giving it to him. But aside from that, we're talking about Diego Lopez getting that shot. But I think if Aljamain Sterling fought Evloev, I think he would have won it. I think we'd be talking about him getting it. And I think he should. I think he's a very interesting matchup for a lot of guys. I do think he can get himself into trouble like he did against O'Malley, where he kind of plays striking and then gets clipped. But if he does it like how he did against Kattar, where he's like, hey, I'm a wrestler, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy, I've got to stick to that, I think he could beat anybody at 45, save maybe Ilia. I don't know if anybody can beat Ilia at 45, but I'd be interested to see Aljamain try. And then, if anything, it's a great win for Topuria. He fights and knocks out Volkanovski, and then Max, and then he fights Volkanovski again, probably knocks him out again, and then he fights Aljamain, and then if he beats him, knocks him out too, then that's 4 wins in a row against 4 of the greatest fighters in those weight classes. Aljamain had an argument for the best 135er ever until he lost to Sean, and then Volkanovski and Max, both 2 of the greatest 45ers. So, I mean, I'd be interested to see. And Ilia's just been fighting a lot of strikers, which is obviously impressive to knock out strikers, but I'd be interested to see him against an Aljamain Sterling who is full-on committed to being a grappler. And then JDM, Jack Della Maddalena, is just so much fun to watch, and he kind of is like, he's like I was saying with Shavkat, he can find a way to win a fight that he's losing, like he did against Gilbert Burns, which I don't even know if he was losing that fight, but he came back and he got a finish, is the point I'm making. And his boxing is so crispy, and I think he could beat anybody in the welterweight division. It's just that what I put down is that his fight IQ lets him down sometimes. I think that just gets better with more cage time and better preparation. But it is still something to note. But if that's your only weakness, then I think you're probably fine. And then for this is the one guy that I am put my flag in down now with Caio Borralho. I think he could be a future champion. I think he's 1 win away from getting to a title shot, and he's super well-rounded. He's part of the MMA Nerds, so he, of course, is going to have a great game plan. He's got great coaching, and he is pretty athletic, too. So I think his fight against Jared Cannonier definitely opened my eyes to what he could do. I mean, he fought, Paul Craig before that, so I think, Bo Nickel's going to beat Paul Craig, probably. So that's not crazy big win, but Jared Cannonier is a solid gatekeeper, even though he's fairly old. But I do think he's super well-rounded, and that's kind of a theme through this whole list, was guys who are well-rounded. And I just would need to see more from Borralho in terms of finishing. But I think with the right preparation time, as long as he doesn't take any short notice fights, I think he could definitely beat a lot of the top middleweight guys. And I'm interested to see what his next fight is. I think it would be cool to see him versus Izzy. But we don't know. We don't really know what's going on at middleweight. With Khamzat winning, jumping from 13 to 10 or 13 to 3 in the rankings, it opens the door for him to steal that title shot from Sean Strickland, and I would definitely like that. And if that does happen, then I got no idea what happens with the rest of the division. So that's my list. That's my top 20. Let me know what you think, guys. Happy to be back. I'll try to keep posting some videos, just being consistent, And yeah, Let me know in the comments what you think. If you like my list, if you don't like my list, why John Jones is the worst fighter of all time. And we'll see you next time.